Hi, my name is Felix Vortsman, and the highest and best use for my business is being the Tri-Plex king.
All right, thanks for tuning into the Highest and Best Use Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about techniques to optimize your land structure, skill sets, and time, as well as the highest and best use principles to make your business more profitable, productive, and efficient. I'm your host, RwCarr, reminding you that good deals are found, great deals are created, and today, Felix Vortsman's on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited about this one, man. So we were chatting before the show, and we've been Facebook friends for a long time, but we haven't actually had a chance to connect. It's just been, like one of those social media circle networks thing, and I'm glad that we're doing this today. This is fun.
Absolutely.
This is great. So you got an impressive bio. I picked the top three here. Founder and chief millionaire maker of Cloud9 Life. That's your company. Number two, owns over 500 units in Canada and the US. I love that. And number three, this is crazy. In process of developing quite literally thousands of low-rise units on both sides of the border. Man, that's impressive.
Well, it's taken a long time, but as with many real estate investors, you kind of evolve and you keep on leveling up essentially to greater and better things.
The evolution. That's so key. That's so key. Okay, so for today's show, we're talking about you as the Triplex king in Welland, Ontario. I love that handle, the Triplex. Where did that come from?
Well, I actually pioneered the actual process of converting single-family homes using only the existing building envelope into legal triplexes. Been doing it since 2018. Unfortunately, there's only one city in all of Ontario that allows us to do it, and that's Welland, Ontario. So that's what I've been focusing on for both myself and my clients. And we've created several of them using every single iteration of low-rise bungalow, although you can do it with multi-story homes as well that you can think of.
Awesome. And for the listeners at home, tell them a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this and why did this come to be?
Well, initially I was working in the corporate world as a CACPA, internal auditor, process improvement specialist, and then reached the pinnacle of my corporate career as a CFO for several organizations. But got really sick and tired of all the bureaucracy. Was ready to basically throw my head into the wall. Just couldn't deal with that stuff anymore. But I've always had a passion for real estate. It started at a young age, actually. One of my friends' moms used to own a bunch of properties and with illegal basement apartments back in the 1980s. Yeah. And we used to get a call every couple of months saying, "Hey, my mom needs you." And I'm like going, okay, we knew exactly what that meant. That meant that some sort of like an appliance like a fridge or a stove that was built in the 1960s and weighed the same amount as a subcompact vehicle needed to be replaced with an equally used and heavy stove or fridge. And so we used to, you needed 4 guys just to lift one of these things out and put it back in. It was just insane.
Can you imagine being a appliance repair person back in the day? Oh my gosh! If they broke, which they didn't because they were so good compared to today. But yeah, lifting those things out, my gosh, 4-man operation and a truck.
You'd be lucky if you got out without a hernia, basically.
It's insane.
But so I talked to her and I said, I'm like going, why the heck would you ever want to do something like this? This is insane. So she kind of walked me through, the whole real estate investment side. And our families, like this is a very close friend of mine, we came to Canada approximately around the same time, plus minus a year. They came in the late 70s and we came in to Canada in 1980. And, similar paying jobs, but I saw firsthand that they were getting further and further ahead through real estate investing. And she kind of ran the numbers with me and it kind of stuck with me all the way through university to the point where, I was working 2 jobs, putting myself through school. I took out OSAP loans, but I had enough money to pay back my OSAP loans at the end of my university career. And instead of paying them off, I bought my first property with OSAP.
It's the best use of funds. If I dare say that would be the highest and best use of funds. I think it paid better than your education, probably, right?
Absolutely. I mean, most of my friends were using it to go on vacation, whatever. But I decided to buy a property.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So you've been doing this for how many years now in total?
Well, as a novice real estate investor since 1998, but I went full steam ahead, I'd say end of 2010.
Wow. Okay. So what did the Welland landscape look like at that point when you said, okay, I'm going to make a go of this. This is the real deal. I'm good at what I'm doing. What was real estate like then, and then we'll compare that to now.
For sure. Well, back then I was not investing in Welland specifically. I mean, I live in Vaughan, which is just north of Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
and the numbers no longer worked in the GTA. So I started looking in outlying areas, and I started investing in cities like Hamilton, Brantford, Barrie. And as the numbers stopped working in those cities as well, or I felt that there were other areas that where I could generate higher returns with minimal risk, I started moving into those areas, and that's why I went from one city to the next to the next. And in 2016, I determined that Niagara region was probably amongst the best areas to invest in across the entire Greater Golden Horseshoe,
Yeah.
both from a price point, from a numbers perspective, from a cash flow perspective, and I'm always focused on positive cash flow with these type of opportunities. So I started up by buying my first property in Niagara Falls, then another one in St. Catharines, and by 2017 we purchased our first, single family straight rental home in Welland. By 2000 in 2015, I actually started doing conversions. I've done every single strategy you can think of under the sun: rent to owns, buy and hold, student rentals. In 2015, a lot of that stuff either stopped working or didn't make any sense to me anymore.
Yep.
I started doing conversions in 2015. Started doing those in Hamilton first, and then basically extrapolated out into Niagara region as well. So I did a full duplex conversion, going the old school rules method in Niagara Falls, converted a property there into a duplex. Followed that up again with another property in St. Catharines, and then basically started doing Welland. And what I noticed with Welland specifically is they have amongst the best building and planning department, and some of the best building inspectors to deal with. They didn't have the onerous rules that some of the other municipalities had. We had full usage of our of the space to use, unlike Niagara Falls or St. Catharines, which has limits.
Mm-hmm.
And the building inspectors were great. They're very practical in nature, as opposed to some of these other municipalities where the building inspection department is highly theoretical and they just don't understand what Part 11 under the building code really means.
Highly theoretical. Isn't that funny when you go from place to place or city to city? Like everybody's operating under the Ontario building code, but like they are, but they aren't in some cases. You know what I mean? Like some people are really lenient and some people are not so lenient. Why do you think that is?
A lot of it is NIMBYism, right? Like, for example, I'll give you an example. Niagara Falls, they literally flipped a bird to the Ontario government after the Affordable Housing Act came out. First of all, they dragged their heels to allow basement units. And finally, when they did start allowing them, they basically said, okay, you want us to allow basement units? No problem. 40% max of your main floor space.
Yeah,
and if you're an investor, who in their right mind would even bother doing it, right? Welland didn't have those limitations, right? And you're right. I mean, the Ontario Building Code should be consistently applied across the entire province of Ontario because it is a provincial legislation. But you're going from one end of the extreme, let's say Niagara Falls, and then you're going into a place like Welland where they're actually interpreting the building code to allow for these 3-unit conversion projects. Whereas most other municipalities, if not any municipality inside Ontario that I'm aware of, other than this municipality, allows for these type of projects. And then it really came down to, I was doing 2-unit conversions, and in 2018 I came across a property. It was a larger 4-level side split bungalow, about 1,400 square feet, so approximately 700 square feet on each level. And when I walked into it, I'm like going, okay, this is a home run with respect to a 2-unit conversion. No problem. I can make this work. But then I'm looking at the space and I'm like going, wait a second. Can I actually split it into more units? And even my planner did not even know whether that was feasible. So he contacted the municipality and they said, sure, no problem.
Really?
Yeah. So that was, based on my understanding, that was probably the very first 3-unit conversion that was ever done in Welland, if not the first, one of the very first.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's good. That's a good use of the space too. Cause I mean, really at some point, like whether your unit's 800 square feet or 1,000 square feet or 1,500 square feet, like at some point people just aren't going to pay any more rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, whatever that 2-bedroom looks like. So for you to cut it up and add that extra unit, you're adding more supply into the system and also making more money too. That's a win.
100%. And honestly, I mean, the way I saw that opportunity is, I mean, if you think about your typical new build pre-construction 2-bedroom condo in a city like Toronto, for example, you're looking at the square footage, you're looking at the layouts of those type of condo units. they're typically approximately 600 to 650 square feet.
Yeah.
One bedroom unit is around 500, 525 square feet. So it presents a massive opportunity. So if you're looking at basically a house such as this, where each level is approximately 700 square feet, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, well, this is actually something that is feasible. And honestly, from a government's perspective, the lowest hanging fruit to provide affordable housing within our province as well, right? We can build it much cheaper than any new pre-construction product of that type.
For sure. Isn't that interesting? You can buy older product significantly less than you can newer product. And give or take, you're going to generate a similar rent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by the time we're done with it, I mean, they look like brand new condo units.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, so we're providing a superior product in a lot of respects. There was a stigma with respect to basement apartments back in the 80s, 90s,
Yeah.
and now some of these basement apartments look a hell of a lot better than even main floor spaces in apartments or even some of the older condo units.
In terms of built form, how did you break it down with the way that these are actually constructed? So you were using the existing residence, you're cutting it up into 3 units. Was coach houses a thing at this point, or was it strictly within the existing 4 walls?
So coach houses is always an option. So Welland does allow for garden suites and coach houses as well. However, it's not an efficient use of funds in order to create that 3 units. And I only use the existing building envelope, so I don't have to worry about pouring a new foundation or doing an exterior addition. So there's massive cost savings there. And a lot of the private services are already located within the property. All you're doing is extending them slightly, similar to the way a typical basement unit conversion would be. However,
Okay, so
I mean, it does pose some challenges, right?
I was going to say, let's break it down into 2 distinct streams. So if you got the coach house, accessory dwelling unit, whatever people call it, right, on the one stream, and then you've got the way that you're doing it within the existing on the other. Let's talk about some of the more expensive portions of the coach house and some of the less expensive portions of doing within the existing 4 walls.
For sure. So sewage is one of them, right? Here we're using the existing sewage inside the house itself, the way I do them. Yes, you might have to extend some sewage pipes here and there, but most of the, those are relatively easy. You can do it from the inside of the house.
Like under the slab kind of thing.
Yeah. And whereas if you're doing like a garden suite or a coach house, you might have to get a totally separate sewage line going from the property line. You also basically, if you're looking at an existing garage, clearly, in a lot of cases, you're going to have to figure out whether that existing garage has proper footings on it. Otherwise, the city would, in some cases, prevent you from constructing that into finished space. And the only way to know about that is you have to literally dig and find out if there's footings.
Dig a hole, yeah.
Exactly. Plus, running the services. I mean, it's not just sewage. I mean, you're talking about water. You're talking about proper hydro. You need about 100 amp service. You could get away with 60 amp service under ESA, but apparently the insurance companies feel that they know better, so they want 100 amp service. And then it comes down to heating and air conditioning options as well. So there's a lot of what if scenarios, and there's different ways to basically construct these units and under both scenarios, and there's different solutions and options available, right? So are you running gas lines, for example, to this coach house, right? Normally you trench out the space once you have that trench built for sewage, and you can always basically piggyback gas lines in that trench, water lines, electrical and all that good jazz as well. But the biggest benefit is in a lot of cases, these coach houses do trigger development charges, right?
Interesting.
Right. And whereas the way I do them, there is no development charges. It's just 2 separate permits. In fact, when I started, there was only 1 permit, but the regional, the Ontario regional region, the region of Niagara, the regional government, said, no. If you only do it with 1 permit, then development charges would apply. So we decided the solution to that is like, no problem. We'll do 2 separate permits. And this is where Welland came in again, like very practical. So normally speaking, you'd have to get final occupancy on your first unit that you completed. The nice thing about Welland, most of the building inspectors, it's not that you're hiding what you're doing. They know exactly what you're going to be doing. The plans have been submitted. But the problem is, technically, you can't start on that 3rd unit until the first permit is closed. Well, we usually are able to speak to the building inspectors and say, hey, do us a favor. We understand that the permit is not issued. You guys have the drawings. as you're inspecting, let's say the framing for this, the basement ADU, can you do me a favor and take a look at the framing for the third unit so we can keep the project moving along? And most of them are actually pretty open to that. There have been some changes with the building and planning department over the last couple of years. I think there's like a new shuffle again, like 2 years in a row. They've basically replaced the whole thing. So who knows if that's going to continue.
Yeah.
But generally, they have been really good with it. And we were able to complete these projects in much more timely manner than basically completing one and then starting anew with the third unit.
If you think about this from an efficiency perspective, submitting one permit for 3 units when you're effectively versus 3 permits for 3 units, when you're effectively ending up with the same density and the same thing when you're done, that's 3 submissions, that's 3 reviews, that's 3, I don't know, fees or what have you. That's 3 of everything versus literally just doing it once. And while somebody's looking at 1 unit, they look at the other 2, and you're done.
Yeah. And I am lobbying the government to that effect as well. I mean, like, it is a very efficient way to construct 3 units. It is the most cost efficient way to do it. It is the easiest way to do it. And one of the overhangs is this 2 permit process, which is kind of irrelevant. You don't really need it. I mean, the nice thing about the city of Welland as well is they're actually pretty quick in approving these permits. Like, normally when we firm up on a deal on one of these properties, our first visit is typically having our planner out there taking the existing measurements. Ideally, by the time we're done, I mean, like, the permits are already, applications and our drawings are submitted to the city for review. And technically, I mean, if they have sufficient time to do it, by the time you take ownership of the property, when you close on the property, you can go the next day with a copy of your new deed to the city, and they issue the permit right there and then, or a couple of weeks thereafter. So you're not waiting for these things for a long time. And the city literally gets it. How the Ford government says, Ontario's open for business. Well, this city is really, really open for business.
That's good. This is your dirty little secret. We shouldn't release this episode. We shouldn't tell anybody.
Well, the secret's out. I mean, like, since I've been investing there, there's a lot of investors. It's probably the best little known secret out there at this stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a coaching client who's doing stuff down in Port Colborne and Welland and in that whole area. And he had the same feeling. He's like, he went in for some planning approvals and so on, and they were really receptive. They were really open to the fact that they're looking for intensification, they're looking for density, they're looking for, new built forms or renovations within existing built forms. Like, they want the growth.
Yeah.
So the fact that you've experienced that firsthand, that's huge. Why can't more places be like this?
Well, I mean, the new Bill 23 that the government has just basically brought forward, once passed, will technically allow pretty much every single municipality across Ontario to allow for these type of conversion projects as right of use, regardless of zoning. And by the way, we're not talking about rezoning these things either. R1 zoning is perfectly great. There's no minor variances required. 2 permits. That's it. No development charges. So hopefully that will basically open up the door to other municipalities. But it really comes down to, again, as you're probably well aware, it all comes down to city bylaws, right? As long as you can in addition to that, they need to remove those bylaw restrictions on a municipal level and how their interpretation of the building code. And that's one of the things that's missing in Bill 23, honestly, because it's more focused on new builds, but it does not basically take into consideration our challenges as small, mid-sized investors and landlords in creating these type of units, while at the same time, they are the lowest hanging fruit out there and do truly provide affordable housing options, as opposed to new builds where nobody can really afford them anymore.
So if you were going to change maybe, let's say, 3 key points of this legislation, what would they be and why?
I would clarify Part 11 under the building code. Like, remember I told you that some municipalities are highly theoretical. St. Catharines is one of them. They have amongst the worst building department I've ever dealt with. It's insane. I mean, the stuff they make you do is like even the highest and best use of commercial application. Forget about residential.
Right.
They just don't get it, essentially. So they need to clarify these aspects. If people are going to be incentivized to do these type of projects, they need to specify and give a bit more leniency with respect to these things. So I'll give you a very quick example. This applies to both 2-unit and 3-unit conversions equally. If you have existing ductwork in a gas, forced air HVAC system, your existing ductwork can stay as is. But if you need to basically do a new run, an air supply anywhere, now you got to encapsulate the entire joist space and with Type-X drywall, which makes no sense. I mean, like, well, what is the building code indicating? That, the 90% of the existing ductwork is perfectly fine, but the other 10% is going to be preventing fires, even with a fire rated drywall on top, below all of this ductwork regardless. So it's a lot of asinine stuff. The other stuff, like, for example, St. Catharines that I had to deal with is Type-X drywall. So when you build your framing, they don't actually allow you to build framing, the framing first and then put the Type-X drywall next. The reason being is they're saying, well, the Type-X drywall is not going right against the foundation line. There's framing in between that is not fire rated. So now they make you put a strip of Type-X above your top rail of your framing, which is insane. It doesn't make any sense. I'm like going, well, that's fine. I mean, if that's the way you're going to be, why can't I just basically put Type-X drywall on the walls as well? No, that's not good enough for them, right? So it doesn't make any sense, even though your fire rating is basically maintained by those type of solutions, but they just don't want to hear about it. They don't want to get it. And there's other things in the building code, like, for example, the spaces, if you're dealing with any side splits or back splits, that common wall where both of the units kind of split. Well, those common walls usually have main HVAC trunks, plumbing lines, and there's like a certain amount where your hose can only be a certain amount before they say no, the fire rating just doesn't work. And you're getting responses from them saying, well, we're going to fire rate the walls, we're going to put in Type-X drywall, we're going to put in safe and sound insulation and resilient channels, and that's still not good enough for them because they're going, well, safe and sound insulation does not have any fire rating. I'm like going, but what is the risk? There is no risk, right? Because you're using the same application as you would inside the ceilings, where you have ductwork, where you have vents, HVAC vents as well. Like it's purely asinine. So they need to reevaluate this building code to make it more specific, not just to new builds, but to accommodate the creation of more types of these type of projects. And I'm sure you've probably experienced these type of issues as well with your own projects as well.
Absolutely. I mean, every time you get an inspection, something's different. There's an intricacy with the property, an intricacy with the project. Something's different on the drawing than it is in real life. Like, this stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
It's the real world. The real world is different than theory, as you say. Okay, so let's talk about the numbers. So if you're doing a triplex in Welland, what do the numbers look like from a purchase price perspective pre-renovation? What does a renovation typically cost? And then what does it rent for when we're done?
Okay. So these days you can pick up these properties anywhere from the high 500s to, let's say, 700, depending on the area, depending on the size, location. Construction costs are going to be the same as what you're experiencing in your neck of the woods as well. What it costs to do a 2-unit conversion. Prices have been going up substantially, and just as to give a bit more clarity, when I started doing my first 2-unit conversions back in end of 2015, beginning of 2016, I was able to do a full basement conversion for under 70,000, all in, including splitting electrical, everything. Now,
was this your own staff, or was this a subcontracted company?
Subcontracted, essentially, right? And that includes actually the removal and reinstallation of all the floor joist spaces and repositioning them in the living room, dining room, including jacking up the front portion of the house. That's how crazy that was. Okay, that cost me $69,000 back then. Now a 2-unit conversion is going to run, it all comes down to choices. I mean, there's legal units and then there's legal units, but then there's also options with respect to what you want to do. So that will impact cost. So for example, you can get away with a 200 amp panel, a single 200 amp panel, and have a legal 2-unit. But the problem, if you want to split that into 2 separate panels, that's quite a bigger substantial cost, right? Yeah. So let's assume you're doing that and splitting water and all the other good jazz as well. So I'd say basically in the high 100s to mid 250, up to 250,000 just to do a 2-unit conversion these days, which is astronomical.
Up to 250,000.
Yeah, I've some of my clients are basically getting quotes of like 225, 250, depending for 2 units these days. It's nuts.
Come on, 250 grand for a 2-unit conversion.
Oh. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like a year and a half ago, it was only 150, right? Like it's there's a lack of trades. Material prices have spiked higher, and the trades are basically saying, you know what, we can ask whatever the hell we want, take it or leave it. So if you're, and also we're talking about like general contractors that are doing the job, right? If you're the type of individual who's more hands-on, you can certainly basically decrease that price by managing all the trades yourself. But if you get a GC involved, in a lot of cases, I mean, they want to take their pound of flesh as well. So that comes at a price. And for the third unit, honestly, the way I do them, 50 grand extra for that third unit, 50, maybe 70 at the top end level, right?
Mhm.
Because you still need to put in a kitchen, you still need to put in a bathroom, you still need to finish off the space. And it really comes down to the size, right?
Yeah.
I've created that third unit. The smallest one I've ever created was out of a single car garage that's less than 234 square feet as a one bedroom unit. It's not a bachelor; it's a full one bedroom unit.
Yeah.
And as large as, like, one of my clients just completed a 3 unit. It's absolutely monstrous. It's a 2,400. I call it the Frankenstein house. They had additions in the past, all that good jazz. Like, they have a main floor unit that's 4 bedrooms, 2 full baths, another main floor unit that's 3 bedrooms, 1 full bath, and a basement unit that's 3 bedrooms plus den and 2 full baths as well. I mean, it's
Wow.
huge,
That's big.
right? And everything in between, right? I've done them a small, if you take a look at a side split, I've done 3 units, a very nice size 3 unit with only 1,150 square foot house.
Mhm. Total renovation cost for a triplex of this nature, a couple $100,000. Like, what do you think?
Again, depending on the options you choose,
Yeah.
depending on whether you split water, split electrical, the level of finishes, all the other good stuff, I'd say anywhere between 200 to 300,000 these days.
Yeah.
So you're looking at basically purchasing a property for, let's say, 600,000. So under $1 million, you can get yourself a really nice triplex.
Yep.
And income wise, again, depending on the number of bedrooms in those accessory dwelling units, I would say anywhere between $5,000 to $6,000 gross.
Okay.
And that could be plus water and hydro as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. 5 to 6 grand. So that's on a rent ratio basis. What would that be? 6 grand divided by $1 million. What is that? 6%? That is 60%, isn't it? Right on. Financing. How do you do financing for these?
Traditional financing, unfortunately, anything under 5 units is still considered residential. So you still have to go with that fold. So yes, we clearly always try to use the BRRRR strategy for these type of things. Financing wise, I mean, you initially purchase the property, maybe with a variable rate mortgage. I mean, especially if you choose to finance it immediately after the conversion. And subsequent to that, do the refi. The biggest challenge there is the same challenge we saw back in Hamilton when we were first starting to do 2 unit conversions. Back then in 2015, nobody was doing them, and there was just simply no comparables in the marketplace. So appraisers had a really tough time trying to get the fair market value for your 2 unit home, right? The newly converted 2 unit home. Now we do have some comparables on the marketplace in places like Hamilton, and similarly 2 unit dwellings in places like Welland even. But the 3 unit aspects, not so much. Most of us burn them out. We don't sell them, so there's no comps. So it's a real crapshoot with respect to the appraised values on these things.
Are they coming in depending on the appraiser you get? Like, is this very person specific or?
Bank specific, person specific? I found that some banks are overly conservative. And sometimes the only comparable available is maybe a purpose-built triplex in a really crappy area of town, in a C, D level of town, and I'm operating B plus A level of town. And I'm like going, you're comparing apples to apples here, and they're like decrepit, and mine is like brand new, right?
That's right.
So it's a bit of a challenge. I mean, obviously, when the market's going higher, I mean, you are getting the numbers that you need in order to do the BRRRRs. Now, these days, nobody's doing BRRRRs. Very few people, unless you're buying these things for a song to begin with. So it's definitely challenging, regardless of whether you do 2 unit conversions, 3 unit conversions, or any other BRRRR strategy to begin with, whether you're a flip or even.
Why do you think this is changing? Is it an interest rate environment that's causing the change? Is it construction costs? What's causing the change in the BRRRRs?
Right now, I would say that, we've been having higher prices for construction for a couple of years throughout the pandemic. Clearly, inflationary forces are there, both on the labor and material side. But the main change right now is it's all interest rate driven right now. The dynamics have not really changed other than that. The low supply of housing, extremely high demand, and it's rising even further. I mean, the federal government just increased their immigration targets yet again. So there's massive demand and very low supply. And when I say low supply, it's not just supply of housing, but truly affordable housing that the masses can actually afford. clearly building new supply of triplexes is not going to be affordable to the masses either. I mean, it's going to improve things, but that's going to be like a band-aid solution that will eventually become, again, unaffordable to the vast majority of the masses as well.
Do you think the infill stuff, let me hop in here for a sec. Do you think the infill stuff, based on what you're saying, would be the solution to some of this problem in a small way, a big way, or it's inconsequential? It's great that the policies are there, but it really won't do much anyways. What do you think?
Infill is challenging. I mean, if you're looking at a city like Burlington and St. Catharines, I mean, they're out of greenfield land. A lot of people don't realize that. They can't really build on any new land. So infill is really the only option available to them. But it comes with its own challenges. I mean, take a look at any high-rise condo development. You have to circumvent all of the services underground, below ground. Everything has to be rediverted, it has to be renewed, and it poses its own challenges as well. But like I said, these type of projects that we're working on, whether it's a 2-unit conversion or a 3-unit conversion, those are the lowest hanging fruit because you're essentially using the existing services. I mean, yes, we do have to upgrade water lines, for example. So this is the other thing I should mention about 3 units. Usually with a 2-unit, they'll allow you up to 3/4 inch supply coming into the property. With 3 units, you really need to go with a 1 inch minimum. Yeah. And if they're already digging it up, I'm like going, if you could give me 1 1/4, I'll take that too. Right? Sure. What is the extra cost for that at 1/4 inch extra pipe versus the overall cost? So those are some of the challenges there. But on the flip side, you're using the existing building structure at the end of the day. And one of my clients is actually doing a 3-unit as an example on a corner property that they can actually, in addition to doing the 3-unit, they can actually sever the lot and build a 2-unit or 2 semis on it, or maybe even another 4-plex potentially on it as well. I honestly, the current legislation doesn't go far enough. I mean, technically, even my very first 3-unit that I did, remember, 700 square feet on each floor. Technically, I could have created 4 units out of that, right? Or 4 units plus a garden suite, or 4 units plus another 2-unit, all next to it. So, I have a client that did a 4-unit conversion, but then you have to go into the whole zoning issue, right? Like, does the zoning allow for that? So,
parking, site plan, services, all the rest of it, upset neighbors.
Yeah. And I'm sure just like yourself, I mean, if we have the right to do it, we'll create whatever the heck we can basically on there. We'll create that density. We'll densify the crap out of that lot if we're allowed to do it. Right. Parking is another hindrance in a lot of municipalities, whether you're doing 2 or 3 units. 3 units, even more problematic because you need 1 parking spot per unit. Now, the nice thing about Welland, they do allow for tandem parking. But from a practical perspective, you really don't want to have tenant parking for your tenants. I mean, you knock, can you move your car like one tenant to the next, essentially, right? It just, it is a bit of a hindrance. And then on top of that,
where are you putting parking on your properties? Where are you putting? Is it the front yard? Is it the backyard, laneway? How do you do it?
All over the place. Like I said, I've done it
wherever you can find pavement.
Yeah. But normally, I mean, I prefer to have slightly wider lots. They do allow for 50% coverage, frontage coverage. So if you have something like a 50 to 60 foot lot, that'd be nice because you can have those 3 lanes of parking in some cases. It's even better if it doesn't have a sidewalk on your side of the property. Now you can make those driveways longer and to accommodate more parking. Sometimes on the side of the property, if it's a quarter property, maybe you could create that 3rd spot basically on the other side of the street, as long as the city allows for it as well. There's a lot of municipal specific restrictions that really have to be dealt with on the provincial level in order to eliminate these challenges on our end. And unfortunately, the governments have not done that yet because they're focusing more on the new builds rather than the lowest hanging fruit.
As we change gears here, the Welland Canal. I know we were chatting on Facebook a little bit about the Welland Canal. I'm really interested in this just from a highest to best use perspective of geography. I think that the fact that this thing's I was doing a little bit of reading on Wikipedia. This thing's 200 years old, major shipping corridor. What is the history on the Welland Canal and why is it so important?
The history of the Welland Canal, I mean, it's been around since the War of 1812. If you go to the Chippewa area of Niagara Falls, the original canal was actually on the Welland River. And what they actually had to do, it was a very stagnant river that was entering the Niagara River, which became Niagara Falls, essentially, just a couple of kilometers down, it becomes Niagara Falls. And what they did back in the day is they actually dredged that canal to reverse the flow of the water to go into Niagara River as opposed to out of it. And you can
my gosh.
Yeah, so we would have seen these wooden ships. But the problem is with that original Welland River is it was very circuitous, very curvy. So you have these tankers like today. There's no way in hell they would be able to accommodate that. So I think it was like in the late 1800s that they actually created the original Welland Canal, and then but they were using a portion of the Welland River still. And then they decided to make it more streamlined because it's to avoid all these curves and everything. So originally the Welland Canal actually went through downtown Welland. So you can imagine sitting in downtown and seeing this monstrous ship floating back. So in 1967, they decided to relocate a portion of that canal closer to Highway 406, just past Highway 406. So about 4 kilometers away. And the original section of the little piece, the original section of the Welland Canal, they kind of rejigged it into a conservation area. Now it's mainly used for recreational purposes. No motorized vehicles allowed. It's actually really, really nice. I mean, they do a lot of international rowing competitions there, kayaking competitions. There's actually a world-class rowing school there. And I only know that because the first conversion I did is actually a mini hotel. It's a full Airbnb, and a parent reached out to us saying, "Hey, in October of all things, I know you don't allow anybody to stay under 25 years old, but we have a friend, our daughter and her friend, they're 16, and they're attending this school." I'm like, going, you guys are getting in, from October to December. I'm like, going, you guys are getting in the water from October to December? Who the hell is going to do that? Like, yeah, they're still basically on the water there. Wow. In the wintertime, there's a lot of ice fishing on the canal. People do go snowmobiling on the canal as well, like that section. So it's really nice. People do fishing on it, even swimming in it. And a lot of development is happening along the canal corridor, heading south towards Port Colborne as well. And really, there's a ton of development all across Welland. The entire perimeter is getting developed, a lot of infill development happening there. Like I said, it's a city that really gets it.
Yeah, it's growing. What do you think the expropriation would have been like back in the day to like all these different iterations that they've had of the canal to make it what it is? Like they would have just had to keep taking people's land.
Well, originally there was no land. I mean, like the city was built around that canal, right?
Sure.
It was kind of a halfway point. I mean, the city is known where the claim to fame is where rail lines and waterways kind of meet, right?
Oh, interesting. A transportation hub. Or would it be transportation, or like what would the technical term be for that? Like a shipping hub?
It's a main economic center in Ontario for trans-border trade. Has been for a couple of 100 years now. The city of Welland itself was kind of like a transfer station, but it provided an opportunity for people on the ships and the railways to get off, have some food, whatever. And the city grew around the canal. So expropriation wise, it wasn't an issue. And even when they relocated it back in the newer portion opened up back in 1973, it was built predominantly on vacant land, like farmland, that sort of stuff. So, expropriation wasn't going to be a huge deal back then.
Yeah. Awesome, man. This has been such an interesting episode, both with the canal and you championing the triplexes in Welland. For me on this side of the lens, it's been really exciting to have you here and talk about what you're doing and all of the things that you've grown. And I know we have another episode coming up in a couple months in the new year, and I'm really excited to have you on there. And we'll talk about growing a portfolio and all of the biggest, craziest things that you've done over the years. So thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me again, Brian. It's been a blast. Looking forward
Where
to the next
people
one.
Find out more about you?
So they can connect with me on Facebook or email me on my email, felix@cloud9life.ca. That's Felix, Felix, at cloud, CLOUD, the number 9, life.ca, or LinkedIn. I'm pretty accessible there.
You'll find him. He's out there.
Yeah, if anybody wants to basically pick my brain or is interested in these type of projects, by all means, they can certainly reach out. I'm willing to help any other investor out there. Kind of my way of paying it forward. Regardless, I want to see everybody succeeding and leveling up.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening to the Highest and Best Use podcast. I'm your host, RwCarr. Don't forget to sign up to the book at thehighestandbestuse.com. Like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.